So again, hi, welcome everybody. My name is Crystal Hooper and I'm going to be the moderator today. I'm also the NJALA treasurer. And today we are joined by Amy Bear Shields, who's the director of the Summit Free Public Library. Amy has her master's in library and information science and is a certified professional with the Society of Human Resources
Hello?
Management. Prior to her role as a director, Amy worked as a human resources generalist and youth
That's a different one. I
services
think
department
that's
supervisor
Martha
for
Stewart.
Somerset County
Yeah, and
Library
it's
System.
next year. It's not, we'll
Amy
finish up
is
this year.
passionate
Yeah.
about learning, particularly
Okay.
about oneself, and in order to continuously grow and improve in both one's work life and personal life. So thank you, Amy, for joining us. Before I hand over the session to you, I'm just going to say if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, please go ahead and say your name and what library you work in. And if you can also make sure that you're on mute, that is incredibly helpful. You can type questions in the chat as we go. We'll hold them till the end to ask Amy. And Amy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Crystal. Hi, everybody. As Crystal mentioned, this is the NJALA session for Know Yourself, a guide to getting organized. So a bit about me. As Crystal mentioned, my name is Amy Bear Shields. I'm the director of the Summit Free Public Library. A bit about my professional background and what led me to be here with you today. I graduated from Miami University in Ohio. A fun fact, Miami University existed before Florida was even a state. With my bachelor's degree in Spanish, I received my MLS from Syracuse University 1 year later, and I began working as a youth services librarian and eventually became a youth services department supervisor. In 2019, I became a certified professional with the Society of Human Resource Management, and I transitioned into working on the administrative side of libraries as an HR generalist. And in April of this year, I transitioned into my current role as the director of the Summit Free Public Library. A bit about me personally. I live in Union County with my spouse, my 18-month-old daughter, and our 6-month-old puppy. I love to be outdoors. This is absolutely my favorite time of year right now, and I love to travel. Right now, I love listening to parenting audiobooks during my commute. In fact, I just finished the book Oh Crap in preparation for our endeavors into potty training. And I'm also a big fan of World War II fiction and books about human behavior. Um, and in my free time, I love doing the New York Times games, mainly the daily crossword, the Ken, the Wordle, and the spelling bee. So if I have any other game lovers out there, please let me know. Okay, so let's dive in. So know yourself. Let's talk a little bit about this. I love to learn new things and take on new challenges, and so does my family. My family actually has this very ad competition to see who can accrue more knowledge and accolades. And since we used to be fans of Harry Potter, we actually call them life Horcruxes. And I have to say that my brother coined the term, or else he would get mad at me. So all joking aside, the absurd idea of life Horcruxes is not to be evil and immortal. It's really a competition to better ourselves, but it's also a nod to the fact that the best way to better ourselves is to put a piece of ourselves into what we're learning and to know ourselves. So knowing yourself is a journey. It's about discovering yourself as a human being, and at times the journey and who you are will be very clear. At other times of change or personal development, we need to allow ourselves to live in a space of not necessarily knowing, but of learning. So, knowing yourself is about being aware of your core values, your priorities, your dreams. It's about respecting your strengths and your weaknesses, your thoughts and your feelings, your tolerances and your limitations. And it's about learning to embrace who you are. And I take this to heart on both a personal and a professional level. So there's evidence out there that shows that people who know themselves are happier, that they make smarter decisions, that they have better personal and professional relationships, that they're more creative, they're more confident, and better communicators. So at this point, you're probably thinking that this is pretty heavy stuff for an NJALA presentation about organizing. But I find that often in the workplace, people become hyper focused on understanding their colleagues. Why did that person do that? Why did that person say that? What is the dynamic between this person and the boss? But the ancient philosopher Lao Tzu said, knowing others is intelligence, but knowing yourself is true wisdom. So, connecting back to why we're here today, when I say know yourself, I'm talking about your personal chronotype, AKA your internal clock. And why are we talking about this? Because this impacts what time of day that you're most focused, what time of day you're most creative, what time of day you're most likely to make a mistake, most likely to be in a good mood, a bad mood, etc. So, here is our agenda for today. During the course of this presentation, we're going to discuss Daniel H. Pink's productivity phases. We're going to consider what your daily tasks are, and we're going to sort them. We're going to discuss the different chronotypes as defined by Pink, and we're going to use this knowledge to begin to get organized. And finally, we're going to talk about turning this organizational tactics into habit. So we're going to dive right in with our first exercise. I want all of you to take 5 minutes and write down all of the tasks that you can think of that are required for your job. Or if you want to go with personal life, that's fine too. So all of the tasks that you can think of that you have to do. And I'm going to put up here a word bubble with some example words to kind of get your brains flowing. You want to think, do you analyze data? Do you write weekly reports? Do you shelve materials? Do you work on the public desk? Do you weed to maintain collections? Do you respond to emails? Do you develop programs? In your personal life, do you create the grocery list? Do you figure out childcare for the week? Do you clean the house? So I'm going to give you just about 5 minutes to kind of create as an exhaustive of a list as you can.
Okay. Amy, we have a few people who joined a little late, so I don't want them to join and think we're sitting in silence. Can you just repeat the instructions?
Certainly. So we're taking a few minutes to write down all of the tasks that we can think of that are required of you for your job, or if you want to focus on your personal life for this, all of the tasks that are required of you in your personal life. This word cloud here has some buzzwords to kind of get your mind flowing. I'm thinking about things like, do you analyze data? Do you write weekly reports? Do you shelve materials? Do you work on the public desk? Maintain collections, respond to emails, create grocery lists, plan childcare, things like that. We'll give everyone about 2 more minutes, but if you're done, feel free to kind of put some of the tasks that you do that I maybe didn't mention into the chat box. We're going to take about 1 more minute. Okay. Crystal, can you read a few of the things coming through on the chat?
I sure can. So I'm seeing a lot of support tickets,
Mm-hmm.
like library and answer chat sessions,
Mm-hmm.
creating presentations, price vendors, tours, liaison services, interviews, library schoolwork, outreach. You guys do
Fabulous.
a lot of different things. Website and app maintenance, social media marketing.
Everyone sounds very busy.
Yeah. Mark records. Yep.
Very
Emailing,
good.
receiving things. Yep. Phone calls, managing staff. Yeah. All great things.
Fabulous. Okay, so if you didn't finish, that's okay. Just know that this is kind of the process that you're going to take when you have the time to kind of complete the list on your own time. So let's get back to it. So let's talk about peak, trough, and recovery. Everyone has their own routine, and by now you're probably pretty settled into it. But I bet at some point, everyone finds themselves saying something along the lines of, there's no way I can work on this right now. For me, this occurs promptly at 3 p.m. every day. Or there might be other times that you find you plow through a task and think, wow, that was way easier than I expected it to be. So a mismatch between tasks and timing could well be because of a lack of synchronization between the type of task and the ups and downs of your personal biology. So our goal here is to be aware of our timings so that we can organize our day to tackle the right task at the right time. Now, I'm not saying that timing is everything, but I am saying that timing has a big enough impact for this presentation to exist. So as I mentioned, Daniel H. Pink, he wrote When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing, and he found that all people of all ages, genders, races across all geographic locations and time zones experience 3 productivity phases over the course of their day: the peak, the trough, and the recovery. So the peak is the best time to tackle your most challenging and analytical tasks and engage in deep work. During this time, your energy levels are going to be at their highest. You're going to be concentrating deeply, and you're batting away distractions left and right. During this time, you don't want to let mundane tasks like answering emails creep into this period of peak productivity. Your trough is the ideal time for your shallow administrative tasks because you're going to have your lowest energy levels and you're going to struggle to focus on difficult tasks. So you're going to want to focus on the tasks that take little to no mental effort. Things like routine emails, filling out forms, simple data input. The recovery, also known as the rebound, is when your mood and energy levels begin to improve again. So our mood is better than the trough, but we aren't as sharp as we are when we're in our peak. We are, in a sense, in a looser time. So this actually causes an inspiration and higher levels of creativity. So the tasks that you'd want to complete here would be things like brainstorming, drafting ideas, creating presentations. So using the peak to tackle the biggest and most important challenges is one of the most powerful levers to increase productivity and impact. For most people, the peak happens in the morning, so scheduling deep work and avoiding distractions during this time is critical. So we're going to move on to our second exercise, and we're going to take a few minutes again, and I want you to think of the tasks that you wrote down on your list. What do these tasks require of my brain? And I want you to put the tasks in one of the 3 columns that you see on the slide, either stage 1, analytical tasks, stage 2, administrative tasks, or stage 3, creative tasks. Later in the presentation, we're going to determine what type of chronotype we are, and we'll be better prepared to take these columns and then determine the best time of day to work on each column in order to create a daily schedule that's going to amplify your ability to organize and be productive. So let's take a few minutes now to take the tasks that you wrote down from before and organize them as analytical tasks, administrative tasks, and creative tasks.
Amy, I haven't seen any questions in the chat yet, but while people are thinking, I just want to say, in case it's hard for you to keep up with the chat because we're pretty active. So good on all of you. The closed captioning won't enable while we're in the live session, but we'll get a transcript out. If you're interested in the transcript, just email njalaconference@gmail.com to get access to it. I'll probably have to do it manual type it, but I'll have it ready probably by the end of the week.
I'm going to give everyone about 1 more minute. Okay, so let's come back together. How did everyone do? Did you have a task that you weren't sure where to put it? If yes, if you want to put that in the chat. And then I'm going to put on my next slide, I have some examples of things that you might see under each stage. So for analytical tasks, we talked about analyzing data, writing a weekly report, developing goals for an upcoming performance evaluation, conducting an EDI assessment of your youth services collection. For administrative tasks, you might have things like answering emails, filling in data on spreadsheets, pulling holds, cutting 50 identical copies of next week's craft. And for recovery or creative tasks, you might have brainstorming new services to offer, creating new programs, thinking of upcoming book display ideas, or coming up with a new presentation idea for NJALA. So I want everyone to keep in mind that what one person finds to be administrative could require a lot of analytical focus for someone else. Or if it's a brand new task to you, it could start out as analytical and it could become administrative over time. For any tasks that you weren't sure where to put, the helpful thing to do would be to take a week, 2 weeks, a month, and as you're completing this task, assess your mindset. Did you begrudgingly complete this task? Did you breeze right through it? Did it have to do with the time of day that you were trying to do this task? So just keep that in mind for anything that you weren't certain where to put it. Okay, so now let's talk about chronotypes. Chronotypes are our specific circadian rhythms, and they define our levels of alertness, sleepiness, and activity throughout the day. Often you'll hear chronotypes being divided into two different ones, the morningness and the eveningness. And we colloquially know that as the early birds and the night owls. In truth, chronotypes are often on a spectrum, and people lie somewhere in between on this spectrum. Daniel Pink offers 3 types of chronotypes, which I'm going to discuss with you and will follow today. But just know that there are also others out there who are defining different chronotypes and in different ways. An example would be there is a Dr. Michael Breus who wrote The Power of When, and he divides people into lions, bears, wolves, and dolphins. I chose Daniel Pink because through personal exploration, it's simply the pattern that I found myself most connecting to. But I will say that one thing I do like about Dr. Breus is that he includes a chart of ideal times to consume caffeine based on your chronotype. So if you are a 3 cups of coffee per day kind of person, you may want to consider looking him up. So getting back to it, according to Pink, there are 3 different types of chronotype. There are larks, third birds, and owls. Larks are what we would consider morning people. On their own accord, and not even because of work or kids, these people get out of bed before 7 a.m. I don't know who you are. I know you're out there. I don't personally understand you, but you account for 14% of people. Third birds are the most common chronotype. They're naturally inclined to wake up somewhere between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., and it covers about 65% of people. Owls are obviously night people, and on days when they don't have to get up for work or some other obligation, they likely don't get out of bed until after 10 a.m., and this tends to account for about 21% of people. And just know that this can actually change. Your chronotype tends to be pretty set, but children tend to start out as larks that morph into night owls during their teenage years. Many people also change chronotype once they get over the age of 60. And here's why it's important to understand your chronotype. While larks and third birds experience the day in peak, trough, and recovery, night owls actually experience the day in reverse, recovery, trough, and then peak. So if you're an owl, you're most focused and thus most able to complete analytical tasks in the evening. So at this point, you're probably either dying to know what your chronotype is, or you've already started identifying yourself with one of the chronotypes that I mentioned. And we're actually going to dive into figuring this out. You can figure chronotype out in a variety of ways. The easiest option is option 1, which is to essentially ask yourself, what time do you go to bed and what time do you wake up? What is the midpoint of that? So for example, if you go to bed at 2 a.m. and you wake up at 10 a.m., your midpoint is 6 a.m. Or in my case, I generally sleep from 10:30 to 6 and my midpoint's 2:30 a.m. Now, if your midpoint is 12 to 3 a.m., you're a lark. If your midpoint is 3 to 6 a.m., you're a third bird. And 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. is a night owl. But I want to say this method is somewhat inconsistent, and that is because people wake up on different times on the weekends. And also, like, based on my work schedule and the life of a parent of a 1.5-year-old, I'm forced to live the life of a lark. But if I were to wake up naturally each day, I'm a third bird. Option 2 is what we're going to get to in just a little bit today, and that's taking the automated morningness eveningness questionnaire that was developed by James Horn and Olav Ostberg in 1976. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But option 3 is what you're going to do to refine your understanding of your chronotype in the weeks to come. Daniel Pink has a daily when tracker, and I will, of course, share these slides with Crystal so that she can send this information out. But it asks you to record things like, what am I doing? How mentally alert do I feel? And how energetic do I feel? You then use these trends to determine your internal clock's ebb and flow. So we're going to take about 5 or so minutes. Crystal's going to post in the chat the link to take the morningness eveningness questionnaire. So please take the quiz. And when you are done, please put in the chat if you are a lark, an owl, or a third bird, or also known as a morning person, an evening person, or an intermediate. We'll take about a few more minutes. Have we had anyone come in the chat yet, Crystal?
We have third bird in the lead.
Ah, understandable.
I think everyone's taking this part of the quiz very seriously to find out what they truly are about themselves.
I see a lot of focused faces.
Yes. Okay, more people are submitting. We got owls, third bird. What's the most common one, Amy?
Third bird. Third bird it is.
So far, that's holding true. Third bird followed by owl.
Very good. All right, so I'm going to bring us back together. If you didn't have time to finish, that's okay. You have the link. And as I said, Crystal will send out this information so that you can take it on your own time as well. But let's start getting organized. So we're going to begin by scheduling time sort of on our imaginary calendar, right? We're going to take a look at the lists of tasks that we organized based on our peak, our trough, and our recovery. And now, knowing what type of chronotype you are, we're going to organize them in an order that works best for you. So if you are a lark or a third bird, you'll have the most luck with analytical tasks that require a lot of focus in the first few hours of your day. Eventually, you'll peak, and then it's into the trough for a few hours. And once you're coming out of the trough, you'll use that time to work on tasks that require creativity. Alternately, if you're an owl, you may still be able to get some analytical work done in the morning since you're kind of trending up, but you won't be quite as focused as your lark and third bird counterparts. But just like everyone else, you'll hit your trough midday, so focus on creative tasks when you're coming out of your trough into your recovery. And if you really want to do your best analytical work, you're going to want to do it in the evening after dinner. So at the beginning of the day or the week, I want you to start putting into practice looking at all of the items you need to accomplish, separate them out into your tasks of analytical, administrative, and creative buckets, and then create a schedule for when you'll work on each of these tasks based on your chronotype. Now, as I mentioned, over the coming weeks, you're also going to refine the ebb and flow of your personal chronotype. So while I can't give you exact hours, you'll start to learn based on that tracking when is the best timing, when you start hitting your trough exactly. Is it right before lunch? Something along those lines. I also want to say, once your schedule is in place, it's a great guide to follow to optimize your productivity and organization, but there will be moments and days and times when you'll get what I like to call fleeting brain moments. And this might be the aha moment you needed for an analytical task, and it might come to you in your trough. And if a moment like this happens, don't turn your back on it based on what you've learned in this presentation. I want you to lean into those fleeting brain moments. Work on that analytical task to take advantage of it. However, if this is something that you are going to need to submit, you might want to wait till the next day to review what you did during that analytical time period and then make any further necessary changes before you submit. So, I know you're probably all saying, well, that's great, Amy, but I'm an owl and I can't work every 5 to 9 shift, or I would never see my family and friends. And it's true, in an ideal world, you would always be able to schedule your tasks according to your chronotype. But what happens if you can't? What if you are the night owl who's forced to work the first shift of every day and you have no choice but to work on an analytical task all day long to hit a deadline? You don't have to resign yourself to less than optimal productivity. There's actually a very simple way to improve your productivity and focus even during your trough, and that is refresh with a break. When we take breaks from our work, it's an automatic refresh and it clears our cognitive space so that we can be more productive. It's not going to be as great as a full night's sleep, but it can pull you out of a slump and help you refocus for short periods of time. But I want you to be aware that when I say a break, I don't mean a break, AKA extension of work, checking your emails while you're at lunch. I mean a very clear break where you can mentally separate yourself from work or the tasks that you're doing. Okay, so eventually you won't need to do this scheduling specific types of tasks for specific types of days because it'll become an internal habit. And you're probably wondering, well, how long until this organization and productivity will become a habit for me? So in 1960, a cosmetic surgeon who went by the name of Dr. Maxwell Maltz wrote a self help book called Psychocybernetics: A New Way to Get More Living Out of Life. He found that when he performed an operation, like a nose job, for example, it would take a patient about 21 days to get used to seeing their new face. Similarly, when a patient had an amputation, the patient would sense the phantom limb for about 21 days before adjusting to their new situation. He said these and many other commonly observed phenomena tend to show that it requires a minimum of 21 days for an old mental image to dissolve and this new one to gel. So, 21 days is your minimum in an ideal world. More recently, however, in 2009, Philip Allally, who's a health psychology researcher at University College in London, published a study in the European Journal of Social Psychology and found that it actually takes more than 2 months before a new behavior becomes automatic. On average, 66 days to form this new habit, but it does vary a bit here and there depending on the person, the situation, the circumstances. So I just want you to set your expectations appropriately. You're not going to suddenly become organized and productive tomorrow. In truth, it'll probably take you anywhere from 1 month to 3 months to build a new behavior into your life. I also want to talk little bit about the 2-minute rule. And this term was coined by David Allen, who's the author of Getting Things Done. And essentially, the 2-minute rule was a way to prevent procrastination. And the idea behind it is that if the next action can be done in 2 minutes or less, you want to do it when you first pick the item up. Otherwise, it's going to take you longer to store and track an item in your brain than deal with it the first time that it comes across your eyes. So if you come in and accidentally open an email during your peak period, you may end up wasting your peak by thinking of your response to that email in the back of your mind, and it would, in effect, become counterproductive. In terms of habit forming, the 2-minute rule essentially states when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do so. So you'll find that nearly any habit can be scaled down into a 2-minute version, right? So read before bed each night becomes read 1 page. Tidy my desk becomes put away my coffee cup. The idea is that to make habits as easy as possible to start. So anyone can meditate for 1 minute, read 1 page, put away 1 item of clothing. And it's a very powerful strategy because once you've started doing the right thing, going in the right direction, it becomes much easier to just continue doing it. A new habit shouldn't feel like a challenge. The actions that follow can be challenging, but the first 2 minutes of it should be easy. And what you're essentially trying to create is a gateway habit that naturally leads you down a more productive path. So you can usually figure out the gateway habits that will lead you to the desired outcome by mapping out your goals on a scale from very easy to very hard. So for instance, creating an entirely new Storytime program series is very hard. Creating a single program within that series is hard. Filling in for someone in an existing Storytime program is moderately difficult. Thinking of your favorite 5 picture books is easy. And remembering the words to Itsy Bitsy Spider is very easy. So essentially, your goal might be to run a marathon, but your gateway habit is putting on your running shoes. And that's how you follow the 2-minute rule. As you master the art of organizing your tasks and your day and your week, the first 2 minutes simply become a ritual at the beginning of what we're trying to create here, which is a larger routine. The other thing that I want to mention is that I don't want you to let cheat days, or essentially days where you kind of miss out and forget or just can't, process, let them get you down. The researchers have found that missing one opportunity to perform a behavior did not affect the habit formation process. So in other words, if you mess up every now and again, if you forget to organize your tasks, it's not an all or nothing process to build these organizational techniques. But I do have 2 strategies that I personally use to combat this. The first thing is I schedule time on my calendar to get back on track. This is sometimes something that I have weekly that's standing, but it's also sometimes that I might schedule very last minute based on need. It's just very good to set aside time to put things in folders, to put ideas down on paper, to reorganize your desk, reorganize your calendar, write down your tasks. I know it sounds very silly, but in the end, it's going to save you a lot of time. I used to work with a really great manager who would schedule what she called brain dumps on her calendar each week to unload information from her mind and organize it so that she could process it and attend to it as appropriate. I personally also like to take a moment each day, and this is going to sound so silly, to appreciate something about an organizing tool, right? So whether it's a tool that I'm using, whether it's more space in my schedule for a separate task, focusing on a positive aspect of how this has helped me each day helps me to keep it going until it becomes second nature. With that all being said, the reason this presentation is about getting to know yourself in order to get organized and not about organizational tools is because I very firmly believe that every person is utterly different and finds the tools that work best for them. I personally need to have all my ducks lined up in a row, but I know plenty of people where that's not the case. In fact, I used to work with one of my favorite people in the world, and we shared an office together for many, many years. And this person's desk was the definition of organized chaos. They knew where every piece of paper that they needed was, but to me, it looked like piles. That being said, I do get asked for organizational tools that I use. And so I'm going to go over just a few beyond my, traditional pen and notepad that I use to stay organized. So the first one that I want to mention is called Break Timer. And Break Timer keeps track of how much you're using a computer, and it reminds you to take regular breaks. It's designed to encourage healthy behavior with a mix of short breaks for your eyes, for your wrists, as well as longer breaks to keep your body moving and your mind on a specific task. You can also personalize a message that appears on the screen, which is an extra something that I love. And mine will frequently say, "No, seriously, don't close this out, get up and take a break." The next thing, as I'm sure you all have a lot of familiarity with, I love Google Workspace. It allows us to use Sheets, Docs, Gmail, Slides, Google Calendar, in order to be more productive. Within Google Workspace, there's something called GQueues that you can get, which is a task manager, and it's very intuitive. You can create lists, put them under specific headings. You can share the lists with people like a colleague or a supervisor. You can create subtasks. You can sync your lists with your Gmail and your Google Calendar. You can add attachments, assign tasks, tag things, etc. The other one that I like to use, and this one I use in my personal life, is an app called Microsoft To Do. It's very simple and it's a free task manager. And my spouse and I use it for everything. And it's great because we can share the lists between us. So for example, within the Microsoft To Do app, we have a grocery list. If someone finishes the last of an item in the house, they add it to the grocery list on the app. Then whoever does the grocery shopping can pull out the list and check off the items as they're put into the cart in the grocery store. I'm sure there are many, many, many other organizational tools out there. And if you have a good one, I would love if you would post your favorite organizational tool in the chat right now.
We already got one. To do first,
Okay.
iCalendar.
iCalendar, very good. Well, I will say continue to put them in the chat because, like I said, I love organization and I love to hear about new tools and ideas that I can look into. But I will say that happy organizing. I'm open to any questions. If anyone wants to reach out and contact me directly, I have my contact information on the screen. But that concludes everything I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. And there's so many other tasks coming in here. Tools people use, Google Calendars and Study Bunny to track productivity, and Dailyo for mood.
Oh,
Using different colors on your calendar, the Outlook tasks, colorful Post-it notes, Out of Milk for grocery lists. That's a cute name. iCalendar, yeah, all sorts. So there were lots of questions that came in.
okay.
So I'm going to
Let's
just start at the top, and apologies if I miss you or if I read a question that already got answered. So is there any advice for tasks that would be better done during the trough, but for external reasons must be done during your peak time instead? So tasks get pushed into your trough time.
So can you repeat that? So it's asking about tasks that are analytical tasks that are actually being done in the trough or reverse?
I'm not sure if the person who typed that in the chat wants to unmute to ask it differently. They sure can, but I'll read it again in the meantime. Advice for tasks that would be better done during the trough, but for external reasons must be done during your peak time instead.
I see.
So
Okay.
tasks get pushed into your trough time.
Yes. So as I mentioned, you're probably going to be in a bad mood when you're working on those tasks. You're probably going to have a hard time pushing through working on those tasks. But the best thing for you to do during those is to take continuous breaks. It might even be breaks that are every 15 minutes where you just need to get up, walk around the room, sit back down, and try back at it. I mean, if you have the opportunity where you can then kind of the next day hit your analytical time period to review what you worked on, that's great. But if you do need to be kind of pushing through those things in your trough, the best thing for you to do is take a break, take a break, take a break every time you're hitting that mental roadblock.
Thank you. Next question. Why are creative tasks listed last if that is where I need to begin my topic?
So creative tasks happen during your recovery and rebound period because, like I mentioned, you're kind of in this almost looser mental state that kind of allows you to tap into those creative notions. So it might be that you have to spread a project out over a week and plan in advance so that you know that you can have the end of your day dedicated to thinking about ideas, creating the process or the presentation or brainstorm ideas for whatever it is, and then the next morning tackle, say, any analytical part of that task that you might need to take on.
Okay, and in throughout the presentation, you mentioned a few authors' names. Could you
Mhm.
name them again?
Certainly, I know I mentioned Daniel Pink, who is the one who developed these productivity phases and who we kind of focused on. I mentioned another option if you don't connect with Daniel Pink's chronotypes is Dr. Michael Breus, and he is the one who I talked about having sort of the appropriate time periods for caffeine intake based on your chronotype. I believe he actually does a TED talk when he talks about those caffeine intakes. I mentioned that a few of the studies, the 2-minute rule was coined by David Allen, who wrote Getting Things Done. I also mentioned, I'm trying to think who else there was. Dr. Maxwell Maltz, who wrote Psycho-Cybernetics, A New Way to Get More Out of Living Life, which was, about the patients who received plastic surgery and forming habits. I mentioned the health psychology researcher Philippa Lally, who published the study in the European Journal of Social Psychology. And I think that might be everybody.
We can
And
put
then,
together a list
yes,
too.
we can. We can. Certainly.
Okay, if you find administrative tasks very easy, can that be considered a recovery task?
So I would say when you're going back to your administrative tasks, if it's easy, you'll want to define it as an administrative task. I mean, you can take care of it in recovery if you have time, if you have nothing creative that you need to work on. But if it's simple and if it's easy and it doesn't take a lot of brain power, the best time for you to get that done is during your trough.
Somebody asked if we can post all links. We certainly will. Like I
Yes,
said, I'll send Amy's slide deck. I'll work on the closed captioning transcript. We'll send links. We'll send a book list. We'll get everything we can think of. And you'll
absolutely.
get a survey about this presentation as well. That'll probably come tomorrow or Friday. There was some confusion about how to interpret the answers when they did the third breakout session. A lot of people were chatting that they got a number.
Right. So the way the morningness, eveningness questionnaire works is it generally divides you into either a morningness person, an eveningness person, or an intermediate person. To connect that to Pink's way of doing it, if you're a morningness person, you're a lark. If you're an eveningness person, you're an owl. If you're an intermediate person, you're a third bird. Now, as I mentioned, chronotypes aren't necessarily like you fit into one box. It's a spectrum, and you might fall anywhere on that spectrum. So you might be a third bird who is at the very beginning point of the spectrum closer to a lark, but you could also be a third bird who's more on the spectrum closer to a night owl. And that's the importance of doing Daniel Pink's questionnaire as you go forward in the next couple of weeks, because it'll help you, as I mentioned, I can't say that your trough is going to be every day from 11 to 4. It doesn't work that way. We're different people. We have different biologies. And even though we might both be third birds or larks or owls or whatever it is, the way we ebb and flow with our internal clock is going to have some variation. So that's why you're going to want to take the time to kind of process the different tasks that you're doing, your mental state, your energy levels, and learn, yes, I might be a third bird, but I tend to hit, my exhaustion levels an hour before my friend who's also a third.
Thank you. What is a cheat day?
A cheat day, right? So it's kind of, when you're talking about habit forming and things like that, like let's say you're trying to start a new diet, right? And obviously a cheat day would be a day where, after 3 weeks of following that diet to a T, you all of a sudden decide you're going to have a big piece of pie. Now, the way habit forming works is basically to say that taking a cheat day will not prevent you from continuing this habit on. So while you don't want to say take 5 cheat days in a row, if you miss one day while you're trying to form these habits, it's okay. Don't give up. Don't think, oh, well, that's it. I forgot to organize my schedule today. I'm just never going to get organized. Just know that if you have a day that you miss, if you have a day where your brain can't handle organizing tasks, it's okay to take one day's break. Just make sure to use some of the tactics I mentioned to try and get back on track. Organize time put time on your calendar to get back into the organization process.
Okay, what do you do when you have tasks that come up unexpectedly, that take priority, that fall into a different section than you have scheduled? For example, an admin task comes up during an analytical time of your day.
Right. So depending on the due date for that task, right? If that task needs to be done that day at that moment, you might just have to plow through and do it that day at that moment, no matter where your mental space is at. If you do have a little bit of leeway with the task to organize it during your, ideal time chronotype during your peak to work on it, that's great. But you might have to work on it at that moment, in which case you're going to want to refresh with breaks. You're going to want to, do everything possible to kind of keep your brain in as productive of a cognitive space as possible.
Someone thought of an author that we didn't mention when we were talking about them, David Allen, and Getting Things Done.
Very
So
good. Yes.
bank it for our list we'll create.
He was the 2-minute rule.
Yep. You got a special shout out from Akshada at SCLS NJ for helping her learn to be professional and organized. And this is the last question that's in the chat, and then we'll open it up to anybody in the room. How do you handle it when you are expected to do something in the wrong time and not given the opportunity to take breaks?
Unfortunately, the way I handle it is I hunker down and I plow through, and I know I'm going to be grumpy, and I know anybody who comes across my path, I'm sorry, because you're probably going to catch me in a bad mood. I'm going to be stressed. I'm going to be panicked. For me, this is my personal way of handling it. I write down every piece of that task on a piece of paper, because for me it feels really good to check boxes on a piece of paper. I feel a lot of personal satisfaction at that. So that's one way I try to make it a little bit easier for me, because I can have that moment of, okay, I got through that. Okay, I got through that. But sometimes the world is not a perfect place. It's not going to be designed specifically toward your chronotype. So sometimes you do just have to hunker down and get through it.
One more question popped up. Amy, is this a format like working through peak, trough, and recovery that you use? They say, as a library director, I'm sure you have to shift mental states a lot throughout the day, and that can be exhausting. Any book recommendations on that?
So it is something that I do use, but I use it sort of as background guidance, right? I will say that the hardest part for me is that my peak is in the morning, but the first thing that I want to do every day is check my emails. And so for me, not opening my emails, it's so hard. But I find that if I save it for later, the amount of work that I get done in the morning is it's my most productive time of the day. In terms of books towards that effect, I'll have to think about that one. I'll put my mind to it and I'll include it with everything that Crystal and I set out.
Okay, you guys have all been very active in the chat. Thank you so much. If anyone wants to raise their hand, I can call on you to unmute. I just don't want you to all unmute at the same time. Or you can keep typing in the chat and I'll ask as things come up. But so far, we're just getting lots of praise and thank yous and
Aw,
great
thank you.
ideas.